The eruption of Mount St. Helens on May 18, 1980, was one of the most dramatic geologic moments in American history. It was a Sunday morning, 8:32 a.m. Vancouver, this is it, was the excited call on the radio from David A. Johnston to his colleagues. Within minutes, the colossal eruption had caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damage, and 57 lives were lost, including Dave Johnston. For 2 months prior to that eruption, scientists with the U.S. Geological Survey and the University of Washington's Pacific Northwest Seismographic Network had been closely monitoring the volcano.
All the deformation on the mountain was local to the mountain, and even more local than that was on the north side of the mountain only.
In the nearly 2-month period before May 18, what was essentially happening at Mount St. Helens was that magma or molten material was moving up from some deep reservoir beneath the mountain up into the volcano itself. And it began to grow or form what we call a dome or a cryptodome inside the volcano. And that inflating body of magma or molten material actually broke the north side of the volcano and began to cause the north side of the volcano to expand out toward the north.
We were measuring the rate of northward movement of the bulge at about 6 feet a day, and we knew that wasn't so good.
On the morning of May 18, I was driving up Interstate 5, headed up to the north side of Mount St. Helens with some parts and some batteries for our time-lapse cameras. And as I glanced over at Mount St. Helens, it was a beautiful blue sky day, and the mountain was sitting out there, and suddenly I saw this mushroom cloud go up above the volcano and climb rapidly up into the stratosphere.
When I was down in the room where the seismographs were at 8:32 in the morning, and I heard a sound, and I just looked over my shoulder, probably just a split second after the earthquake, the big earthquake had started, and saw that this was something very large, larger than we'd seen before. Watched it for a few seconds just to confirm that. And then I ran upstairs to the next floor, up to the radio desk of the Forest Service, and called Dave. And we couldn't get through. There was no answer.
So I guess I had the realization right away that this was some kind of a tragedy. And on the one hand, it was this huge, exciting, and interesting magmatic eruption, and on the other hand, I was pretty certain that something terrible had happened to Dave. So it was a strange day for me.
And we were off the ground probably at 9:05 or something like that. I mean, it was really, really rapid, and got up to the point where we could really see the mountain well, I suppose between 9:20 and 9:25, something like that. There was this terrific, very vigorous vertical eruption column that was the stem of the mushroom or the toadstool that then blossomed out at greater height. And for most of the morning we saw this tremendous ash cloud roiling out toward the northwest, and I can only assume that was coming off of the big pyroclastic flows that were going off in that direction that later built the pumice plain. It was a very eventful morning, but it was sobering, because I remember thinking up in the airplane that Dave just couldn't have survived this, especially when we got around to the west side and saw all this ash headed in his direction.
On the morning of May 18, what actually happened, the landslide basically uncorked this pressurized body of magma and allowed it to explode or expand out towards the north very rapidly. This is what we call the lateral blast. It was a horizontally directed explosion of incredible magnitude. It caused this expanding cloud of ash, rocks, and gases to move out across the countryside to the north at speeds of several hundred miles an hour. The directed blast was really the most destructive event that occurred on the morning of May 18. It completely destroyed an area of 230 square miles in the matter of somewhere between 5 and 9 minutes. It essentially killed every living thing within an area of 230 square miles, and it destroyed hundreds of acres of virgin forest, and it was an incredibly spectacular event.
We put out news stations, and we quickly started to remonitor the volcano again, because we had no idea what was going to happen.
Before the dust had literally settled in the summer of 1980, there were USGS scientists swarming all over the area out in the blast zone, studying the pyroclastic flows, studying the debris avalanche deposit, studying the directed blast deposit.
We thought it likely that there would be more eruptions during the summer, and indeed that took place.
Suddenly this immense black eruption cloud came pouring up out of the white layer, that the cloud tops. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, I thought, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life.
We learned a lot about how you interact with the civil defense, with the public, with the press. And that was transferred by the press to the world. And as a result, I think volcanology took a quantum leap in science as well as applicability to society's needs.
The subsequent eruptions were actually, most of them were forecast fairly accurately by the USGS team of scientists. So when it looked like another explosion was about to take place, our helicopter crews would pick us up and we'd move out to the outskirts of the blast zone. We'd watch and photograph the next eruption. As soon as the eruption stopped, we'd race out there and study the deposits while they were still hot, while they were just after they'd settled onto the ground. So it turned out that the 6 years that Mount St. Helens was erupting in the early 1980s was an unprecedented opportunity for USGS scientists to study hot, fresh, young, and exciting deposits from explosive volcanism. We learned incredibly new and important bits of information about how volcanoes like Mount St. Helens work, what kinds of deposits are produced during these explosive eruptions, and how to anticipate and mitigate the consequences of explosive eruptions.